You! Look at this! The Forbes cover with her?
Yes, my new girlfriend.
Jealous?
You took everything, I built it back.
This can't be real!
Corey was 41 years old, and he believed, the way a man believes in gravity, that if you worked your land with honest hands and kept your word, life would be fair to you. He was wrong about one thing. Not about the work, not about the honesty. He was wrong about the people standing closest to him while he did it. For 12 years, he had poured every callus, every early morning, every aching shoulder into a farm he built from raw Georgia clay outside Athens. He and his wife owned it together. Or so he thought. The paperwork had been telling a different story for 3 years, written in the back of filing cabinets while Corey was out in the fields doing what he always did, building. But here is the part Ariana never factored into her calculations. Corey had already started writing a story of his own. It is a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and the porch of the old farmhouse on the outskirts of Athens smells like red clay and the last warm breath of summer. The fields are still green gold. Somewhere in the distance, a tractor idles, that low, patient hum that says the land is still working, even when the people on it are not. Ariana is sitting on the porch swing with her phone in her hand, scrolling the way people scroll when they are restless without knowing why. A copy of Forbes magazine sits right there on the wicker side table. She almost does not pick it up. Almost. She reaches for it out of habit, turns the cover face up, and then she goes completely still. On the cover stands Corey. Her Corey. Tall, broad-shouldered, those large calloused hands relaxed at his sides, a wheat field stretching wide behind him, and a row of gleaming storage buildings catching the afternoon light. He is not smiling exactly, but there is something settled in his face, something that looks undeniably like peace. Standing beside him, close and easy, is a woman. The headline reads, "Quiet Power: How Corey and Zuri Foster Built One of Georgia's Most Successful Family Farms from the Ground Up." Ariana's phone slips from her other hand and hits the porch floor. The screen stays lit. She does not reach for it. She knows that face. She has seen it before, in a photograph tucked inside the farm's filing cabinet, behind the equipment receipts. A photo of Deshawn with a woman he had described as a professional contact from a land dispute case. Ariana had not asked questions at the time. She had been too absorbed in her own plans. Now that same woman is standing in a wheat field on the cover of Forbes beside Ariana's ex-husband. Ariana's hand finds the porch railing. Her knees buckle, not dramatically, just a slow, quiet giving way, the way a fence post gives when the ground beneath it has been shifting for a long time. She grips the railing hard and stares at the cover like she is looking at something that was supposed to be impossible. She whispers, "No, it can't be him." The sweet tea sits untouched. The swing drifts once and goes still. She is not thinking about the divorce or the farmhouse or the transfers. She is thinking about the look on Corey's face. That settled, peaceful look. The look of a man who has already won something and does not need a single person in the world to know it yet. If you have ever worked hard for something and had someone take the credit while you were not watching, you already understand the feeling building in Ariana's chest right now. Except this time, she is not the one who was overlooked. She is the one who did the overlooking. And somewhere out beyond those fields, Corey is not thinking about her at all. But to understand how it came to this, we have to go back to the night Ariana sat on this same porch with a glass of wine and said the words she had been rehearsing for weeks. The night she was certain everything on this land was finally, completely within her reach. Stay with us, because what happened that night, and the one quiet thing Corey did immediately afterward, will change how you see this entire story. The night Ariana asked for a divorce, it was raining. Not a dramatic storm, just a slow, steady Georgia rain that darkened the soil and made the barn roof tick quietly, like a clock keeping time on something no one had named yet. Corey had been out since 5 that morning, repaired a drainage line, replaced a broken harvester belt, spent 2 hours reinforcing a fence post leaning since spring. Before going inside, he stopped and corrected it, a degree or two to the left. If something had shifted out of place, Corey straightened it. He had been that way since he was a boy. He came up the porch steps, boots muddy, shirt damp. Ariana was sitting in the swing with a glass of wine, dressed nicely, hair done. Unusual for a Tuesday night on a working farm. Corey noticed. He noticed everything. He just did not always say what he noticed. She looked up. "Corey, I want a divorce. We can do this peacefully." The rain kept falling. The barn roof kept ticking. He looked at her the way he assessed a broken piece of equipment, steadily, taking in the full extent of the damage before deciding what came next. Then he said one word. "Okay." Ariana had prepared for arguing, for tears, for the exhausting confrontation she had rehearsed responses for. She had not prepared for okay. Something flickered across her face, relief or something uneasy just beneath it. She nodded and went inside. Corey stood on the porch a moment longer, listening to the rain. A man who reacts loudly to betrayal has been caught off guard. A man who says okay and goes quiet has already seen it coming. Corey's calm was not weakness. It was the practiced stillness of someone who had been reading the signs for months and had already begun, quietly, to prepare. Most people wait for the fire before they reach for water. Corey had been filling the bucket for a year. Then he went to the farm office, opened the old gray filing cabinet, and pulled out a photograph he had known about for months. Ariana, Deshawn, and a woman standing outside a building in Atlanta. Deshawn had called her a professional contact. Corey had written the date on the back in pencil the first time he found it. He looked at it now. Then he placed it back, exactly as he found it, not a millimeter off. He did not confront her. He did not accuse her. He understood. Tip your hand too early, and you lose the only advantage patience gives you. 3 weeks later, while Ariana was in Athens on errands, Corey went through the office files. In a manila folder behind old seed catalogs, he found it. Bank statements, dozens of them, going back more than 3 years. Transfer after transfer, steady and quiet, like irrigation lines running underground. Almost invisible unless you were specifically looking. Money moving from their joint farm account into a secondary account he had never seen. He turned one statement over, a handwritten note in Ariana's script. "Move to secondary account. Deshawn will handle it." He sat with that note for a long time. Ariana did not betray Corey because she was cruel by nature. She did it because she was terrified. She had grown up watching her mother work 2 and 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. That kind of childhood rewires how a person reads safety and danger. When loyalty competed with her fear of returning to nothing, the fear always won. Understanding betrayal rather than just reacting to it is the first step toward not being consumed by it. Meanwhile, at a cafe on East Clayton Street, Ariana was having coffee with friends. "Corey is just a farmer," she said. "He never suspects anything." She was half right. He never reacted. That is a very different thing from not knowing. She had made a mistake more common than most people realize. She confused silence with ignorance. A farmer has to read his environment carefully. Corey applied that same attention to the people around him. Ariana mistook his stillness for a blank wall. It was, in fact, a camera. It was Isaiah Knox who found Corey the attorney. Isaiah was 65, a farmer near Watkinsville, with the kind of quiet authority that comes from outlasting most of his problems. When Corey came to him, calm, certain, photographs on his phone and a folder under his arm, Isaiah sat with him on the porch for an hour without saying much. Then he made a phone call. Serena Blake was a focused attorney on Millage Avenue in Athens who built her practice on agricultural fraud cases. She listened without interrupting. Then she told him something that made the room go quiet. 7 months earlier, she had received an anonymous email. No names, no case numbers, just enough detail to suggest a wife was draining assets from a jointly operated farm. She had filed it and waited. "I couldn't act on a nameless tip," she said. But the moment you walked in, every detail matched. What Serena uncovered over the following weeks was methodical and damaging. Deshawn, Corey's former farm assistant, still holding keys to the storage units, had created a shell company and funneled tens of thousands of dollars from the farm into payments for services that existed only on paper. The money purchased land and equipment under a separate LLC 2 counties away. Ariana had not known every detail of Deshawn's methods. She had known enough. Serena explained one more thing before the court date. The farmhouse had been transferred into Ariana's name 8 years into the marriage. Ariana had framed it as estate planning, a way to simplify inheritance if something happened to Corey. He had trusted her and never looked deeper. "That transfer is why she feels so confident right now," Serena said. "But if Deshawn's fraud can be tied to transactions involving that property, the court can order a remedy. You accept the settlement on the surface. We build the case underneath." The court hearing on West Washington Street was brief. Corey signed an agreement that left him with his old truck and a figure that made Serena's assistant quietly wince. He walked out looking like a man who had lost everything. That was exactly the impression he needed to leave. That evening, his phone buzzed on the truck seat. She just called her brother, said, "Everything is done. He doesn't suspect a thing." He set the phone face down. He kept driving. Back at the farmhouse, Ariana and Deshawn were at the kitchen table. Deshawn had opened something cold to drink. Ariana smiled. "We won." For exactly 1 breath of time. She was right. Corey found that photo in the filing cabinet months before Ariana ever said the word divorce. He saw the transfers. He knew. And he said absolutely nothing. Was Corey's silence the smartest move he ever made? Or the one mistake that cost him everything? Type 1 if staying quiet was the right call. Type 2 if he should have confronted her immediately. Or drop your own story below. Stay with us, because the night Corey sat alone in a small cabin with nothing but a broken tractor and a quiet promise to himself is the exact moment this story turns. Corey moved into a cabin on a friend's property just outside Watkinsville. Small place. Wooden walls, a rusted screen door, a propane stove that took 2 tries every morning to light. The kind of place that makes a person feel either completely broken or strangely free, depending on what they bring in with them. Corey brought very little. Clothes, tools, his truck, and something Ariana had never once thought to account for. His patience. He was not sulking. Every morning he was up before first light, either out on Isaiah's property or sitting at the small table inside with a yellow legal pad, writing down numbers and plans in his careful, unhurried handwriting. The kind that does not rush because it already knows where it is going. At night, he repaired things. His neighbor had an old John Deere that had not run right in 2 seasons. Corey took it apart by lamplight, piece by piece, not forcing it, just understanding each component until the whole machine made sense again. One night, very late, he held a cracked hydraulic fitting up to the light and said quietly to no one, "Everything can be fixed if you know how." He was not talking about the tractor. When most people experience major betrayal, stripped of their home and financial security, they explode outward, collapse inward, or drift into numbness. What almost no one does is convert that raw pain into disciplined, forward-facing action. Psychologists call it constructive withdrawal, not suppressing the hurt, but channeling it into something that builds rather than destroys. It is extraordinarily difficult. It is exactly what Corey did every night in that gravel driveway. That winter, Corey showed up at the Athens area co-op for the quarterly growers meeting. He sat in his usual chair near the back and said little. At the break, an older farmer named Ronald came over and clapped him on the shoulder. "How are things, Corey?" "Building," Corey said. Ronald nodded, the way people nod when they hear something simple that is not simple at all. In that room, Corey looked like a man who had lost everything. But in the private ledger on that yellow legal pad, the numbers were already moving. Not one person in that room knew it. That is the particular power of building in silence. The people who underestimate you cannot correct for what they cannot see. Meanwhile, Ariana's world looked exactly the way she had imagined. She had the farmhouse, the land, the equipment in her name. She called her mother one evening, her mama near Decatur, who had worked 2 and 3 jobs through Ariana's entire childhood. Her mama asked how she was doing. "I'm fine, Mama. Corey will be okay." A pause. "I hope you're sure about what you've done, baby." "I'm sure," Ariana said. She was not sure, but choices built on fear do not hold still. They keep asking to be justified in the quiet hours when there is nothing left to distract you from them. 6 months after the divorce, Isaiah Knox asked Corey to lunch at a diner on West Broad Street. He set down his coffee cup and said it plainly. "I've had a partnership structured and ready for 6 months. I was waiting for the legal dust to settle. Your name can go in today, if you're ready." Corey went still. Isaiah laid it out. A major farm operation north of Oconee County. Good soil, excellent water access, solid investors. He had built the entire framework and left one seat open at the table. "Why me?" Corey asked. Isaiah looked at him. "Because I've been watching you farm for 20 years, and I've never once seen you do anything carelessly." A mentor does not give a speech. He acts. Isaiah treated Corey's potential as a settled fact before anyone asked him to. Psychologists call this reflected appraisal, the way we come to understand our own value through the eyes of someone we deeply respect. In the darkest chapter of Corey's life, Isaiah looked at him and saw a man worth investing in. That kind of belief, demonstrated through action, can mean the difference between a man who survives a hard time and one who rebuilds from it entirely. Corey picked up a pen and signed. "Patient hands," Isaiah said, folding the papers. "Build the best farms." Zuri Foster came into the picture the way the right people usually do, not loudly and not by accident. She was 34, a farm management and forensic specialist out of Atlanta, known for untangling complicated agricultural operations. Serena had recommended her when the fraud in the old farm accounts proved too layered for standard legal review alone. What Zuri found immediately was small but decisive. Deshaun had forwarded an old farm supply contract to a commercial partner, a contract predating his time as Corey's assistant by several years. It placed his fingerprints on documents he should never have possessed, tying his shell company directly to the farm's operating history. They worked through long evenings at the cabin table, documents spread between them, building the full picture. What neither of them said directly, not yet, was that Zuri had known of Corey long before any of this. She had followed his operation through the agricultural community, his crop rotation, the way other farmers spoke about him, not loudly, but with specific professional respect. She had mentioned to a colleague once that she had rarely seen anyone manage land with that combination of patience and skill. She had not approached him then. He was a married man. She had kept her distance and noticed from far off. One detail would matter later: the photograph of Zuri and Deshaun in Ariana's old filing cabinet. predated everything. Zuri had been consulting on an unrelated land case in the county. Deshawn had approached her firm separately. She had no knowledge of his family connection to Corey. The overlap was pure coincidence. And when Ariana eventually realized it, that coincidence deepened her unraveling far beyond anything Corey had planned. The farm north of Oconee County grew, quietly at first, root systems building underground before a single green blade showed above soil. Then a second expansion, a third. One morning, a writer from Forbes called Serena's office. Corey thought about it for 2 days. Then he said, yes. 2 years after the divorce, he and Zuri drove a new pickup truck down the gravel road toward the old farmhouse for a routine land assessment. Corey drove. Zuri sat beside him with a folder in her lap. He was not thinking about Ariana. He had not thought about Ariana in a long time. But Ariana was standing on the porch. What happened when she saw that truck is something you are not prepared for. And the worst blow of that afternoon did not come from Corey at all. The gravel crunched under the tires as Corey eased the truck to a stop near the old barn. The afternoon was still and warm. A red-tailed hawk turned slow circles over the back field. The oak tree beside the fence line, the one Corey had planted as a sapling the second year on this farm, was fully grown now, throwing a wide shadow across the driveway. He had not been back here since the divorce. He noticed the tree first, the way you notice something you put into the ground with your own hands. Ariana and Deshawn were on the porch. They had been going over paperwork on a small equipment sale to a buyer in Madison. An ordinary afternoon on a piece of land they believed was fully and permanently theirs. Ariana heard the truck before she saw it. She turned. She recognized the shape behind the wheel before she could make out his face. The invoice she had been holding fell from her fingers. It drifted to the porch boards without a sound. Corey stepped out of the driver's side. A crisp gray shirt she had never seen before. He moved with the same unhurried, deliberate ease he had always had. But there was something different about the quality of it now. He looked rested, like a man who had slept soundly every night for 2 years. Like a man who carried no debt of resentment toward the world. Zuri stepped out from the passenger side and walked around the front of the truck. Calm, composed. Something in her bearing that said simply, I belong exactly where I am. Ariana's hand found the porch railing. Her knees did not give out completely, but they buckled, the way a fence post buckles when the ground beneath it has been shifting for a long time, without anyone noticing. She gripped the railing hard, her face going pale, staring at Corey like she was looking at someone who was supposed to be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere smaller, somewhere diminished. Deshawn stepped forward and grabbed her arm to steady her. He looked at Corey. He looked at Zuri. He looked back at Ariana. And then, because Deshawn had always been the person in any room who made things worse at exactly the wrong moment, the words came out, low and cracked right down the middle. She told me he only had that old truck and a little bit of cash left. He said it like he was thinking out loud, like the thought escaped before he could stop it. And there it was. In one sentence, in the open Georgia afternoon air, every layer of Ariana's deception collapsed. She had not just withheld the truth from the courts, she had deliberately misled her own brother about Corey's situation, understating him, managing Deshawn's confidence the same way she had managed everything else, with calculated misinformation. She had used Deshawn as a tool and had controlled what the tool believed. Deshawn stared at her. Ariana could not meet his eyes. What Ariana experienced in that moment has a name: schema collapse. For 2 years, she had built her entire sense of security on a single comforting story: that Corey was finished. that the man who had walked out of the courthouse with an old truck and a modest settlement was the end of the story. She had told herself that story so many times, so convincingly, that it had stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like reality. When Corey stepped out of that truck, rested, accompanied by a woman who radiated professional competence and ease, carrying none of the defeat Ariana had assigned to him, that story collapsed all at once. This is why her reaction was physical, not merely emotional. It was not embarrassment. It was the sudden, disorienting collapse of the internal world she had carefully constructed to make herself feel safe. The only sounds were the wind moving through the field, the hawk somewhere overhead, and a mockingbird in the oak tree cycling through its full repertoire, completely indifferent to the gravity of what was happening on the porch below. Corey looked at Ariana, briefly, without cruelty, without satisfaction. The way you look at a section of fence you once poured real labor into and have since had to walk away from. He gave her a small, quiet nod. Professional. Conclusive. Then he and Zuri walked toward the barn to meet the land assessor. He did not look back. 3 days later, Corey called Ariana and asked if she would meet him for dinner. She said yes faster than she should have. Understanding why she agreed is worth a moment. When someone has wronged another person deeply, and the wronged party has responded not with anger or grief, but with complete and sustained silence, the person who caused the harm does not feel free. They feel unsettled, unresolved. They spend months, sometimes years, waiting for the reaction that never comes. Ariana had been waiting for Corey to fall apart, to call her name, to give her a scene she could respond to, negotiate within, or defend herself against. When he finally called, she did not hear an ending. She heard the opening she had been waiting for, a chance to renegotiate her position, maybe to manage this the way she had managed everything else. She agreed because she still believed there was something left to handle. She had not yet understood that Corey had not called her to reopen anything. He had called her to close a door. He reserved a table at a restaurant on South Lumpkin Street in Athens, quiet, upscale, white tablecloths and low light. Ariana arrived early. She had dressed with care. She had things to say. Corey arrived exactly on time. He sat down across from her, placed a folder on the table between them, and did not open it right away. They glanced at their menus. Then he said, "There are some things you should know." He opened the folder slowly, one page at a time, not performing it, just letting each piece of truth settle into the space between them before the next one arrived. The first page, the secondary bank account, every transfer documented. 3 years of patient, systematic movement of money that Ariana had believed was completely invisible. Her champagne flute trembled. She set it down on the tablecloth. The second page, Deshawn's shell company, the fraudulent invoices, payments for services that never existed, the land and equipment he had purchased with money drawn directly from a farm Corey had spent 12 years building. Serena had included a key detail here. The fraudulent transactions had been partially secured against the farmhouse property itself, which meant that when the court ordered the remedy, the legal mechanism tied the property to the fraud recovery. The farmhouse had not been taken from Ariana. It had been reclaimed as part of the adjudicated settlement. She said nothing, jaw set, still trying to hold composure. The third item was not a page. It was a phone placed face up on the white tablecloth, a short audio file already queued. Corey pressed play. Her own voice filled the quiet space between them, from a call she had made to Corey 2 years earlier. A call in which she believed she was managing him, recorded with his full knowledge of his own participation. "Don't worry about any of this. You trust me. You've always trusted me. That's all that matters right now." And then Deshawn's voice in the background. "Is he going to push back?" And her response, "He trusts me like a load-bearing wall. He won't." The restaurant was not loud, but it felt very quiet. Ariana's composure fractured, not explosively, just a small, precise crack. The kind that runs through fine material and does not announce itself until the piece finally separates. "Corey, I had the opportunity to tell you what I was building," he said, his voice even. "I chose not to." He looked at her without heat, without performance. "I let you believe that silence meant I didn't know. It didn't." She tried again. "There has to be something we can—" "You are living in a farmhouse," he said, "that belongs to my company." The court's remedy included it. "Serena's office will send you the documentation today." He pressed play again and let the entire recording run. When it ended, he stood. He buttoned his jacket, one button, slow and deliberate, and walked out of the restaurant. Not angry, not performing anything, simply done, the way a man is done when there is nothing left that requires his presence. Ariana sat alone at the white tablecloth table, her glass untouched. Her phone buzzed beside it. Serena Blake's office. Legal notice. Deshawn had been found liable for agricultural fraud and faced significant civil and criminal penalties. The land and equipment he had purchased with the fraudulently obtained funds would be subject to civil forfeiture. Ariana was ordered to return all transferred funds with interest. The farmhouse would be sold, proceeds applied to the legal remedy. What Corey did in that restaurant was not revenge in the conventional sense. Psychologists would describe it as strategic disclosure, the carefully timed, precisely sequenced release of documented truth. He did not post the recordings publicly. He did not call her family. He did not broadcast anything. He waited until he was sitting across from her in a controlled, dignified setting, and he let the evidence speak with the full weight of 2 years of patience behind it. That restraint is the hardest kind of justice to deliver, because it demands that the person who was hurt remain composed long after the wound was made. But it is also the most complete, because it cannot be dismissed as emotional or retaliatory. It simply stands there, factual and undeniable, and asks nothing except that everyone present look at it clearly. Outside on South Lumpkin Street, the October evening air smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves. That particular Georgia October smell that makes you feel as if the world is quietly, deliberately preparing for something new. Corey got in his truck and drove home. What happened to the old farmhouse, and the handwritten letter that arrived in Corey's mailbox after it was sold, is the part of this story that will stay with you longest. The old farmhouse sold on a Friday morning in November. A young couple from Augusta had driven out 3 separate times before making their offer. 2 small children, a boy of about 6 and a girl who could not have been more than 4, had run straight through the backyard both times, arguing cheerfully about the chickens through the fence, pressing their small faces against the barn window glass. The kind of children who make a farmhouse feel like it already belongs to them before the ink is dry. The husband worked in agricultural logistics. His wife taught 2nd grade. They had been careful with their money for a long time. It showed in the way they carried themselves at the closing table at the title company on West Hancock Avenue in Athens, like people who understood the full weight of what they were signing. The wife was crying before the notary had even said a word. Not from sadness, from the particular kind of relief that only arrives after a very long, patient wait. Corey shook the husband's hand when the papers were done, firm, unhurried. "Take good care of this land," he said. "I built it with my own hands." The husband held the handshake for a moment and nodded. He understood, without being told, exactly what that sentence was carrying. Corey walked out into the November morning, cold, bright, the kind of Georgia winter day that carries no weight of unfinished business. He did not look back at the building. There was nothing left to look back at. The legal consequences for Deshawn moved quickly once the court records became public. Word travels fast in agricultural circles. faster than most people outside those circles realize. Farmers have long memories and a collective, deeply held contempt for people who steal from land or from those who work it. Within weeks of the proceedings becoming a matter of public record, Deshawn had lost 2 business partnerships, had a commercial supply contract pulled without explanation, and found that calls to the county co-op went unreturned. The land and equipment he had purchased with fraudulently obtained funds were subject to civil forfeiture proceedings. By the following spring, he had lost most of what he had acquired and was back to hired work on someone else's property, the same position he had started from before he ever decided Corey's hard-built farm was something he was entitled to take. No drama, just a quiet, factual landing. Ariana moved back into her mother's house near Decatur. The woman who had worked so hard her entire life to put distance between herself and the poverty she grew up in, moved back into that same small house with her suitcases and her silence. There is a particular kind of grief that does not come from losing something that was taken from you. It comes from losing something you gave away yourself while chasing something that turned out not to be what you thought. Ariana would spend a long time sitting with that kind of grief, the kind that does not have a villain to blame. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Corey found it in the mailbox at the end of the drive on his new property, a farm north of Oconee County, near the Appalachie River, with productive flat land and a stand of longleaf pines at the back that cut the wind in winter. He had been out on the tractor most of the morning. He came in with muddy boots and a cold thermos, pulled off his work gloves, and opened the mailbox. The envelope had a Decatur postmark, handwritten address. The return name was familiar, Ariana's mother. He stood at the mailbox and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully and tucked between its folds, an old photograph. The photo showed the family at the original farmhouse, taken in summer. Corey was in it, younger, his arm around Ariana. Her mother was squinting into the sun the way people do when the shot is taken at the wrong angle. Deshawn was off to one side, looking somewhere else. Corey set the photo on top of the mailbox and read the letter. It was brief. Her handwriting was deliberate, each word pressed firmly into the page, the way a person writes when they have been thinking about what to say for a very long time. She wrote that she had known something was wrong, that she had tried, quietly and in private, to say something to Ariana. She wrote that Ariana had told her plainly, without hesitation, that if she interfered, she would not be allowed to see her grandchild again. I stayed silent, she wrote. I stayed silent when I should not have. I am sorry for that. And then, at the bottom, in slightly smaller letters, you were always good to her, and to me. I never forgot that. There is a kind of pain that does not arrive loudly. It settles into the chest, into the quiet places behind the eyes. And there is a kind of healing that does not announce itself. It comes the way good rain comes, slow, steady, soaking deep into the ground before you realize how dry everything had become. Ariana's mother's letter was not an explanation, and it was not an absolution. It was something simpler, an honest word from an honest woman who had been trapped between the person she loved and the right thing to do. Corey, who understood that particular trap better than most, held the letter with something closer to compassion than to anger. He had always liked her mother. He folded the letter, walked back up the drive, and placed it inside the cabinet in the farm office. Not in the trash, not on display. Simply put away carefully, the way you put away something that mattered but does not need to be carried anymore. Then he pulled on his work gloves and walked out to the south fence line. A post had shifted in the last freeze, leaning a few degrees off true. He had noticed it that morning. He crouched beside it, took it in both hands, and worked it slowly and steadily back into place. When it stood upright and solid, he let go and looked at it for a moment. Everything can be fixed, he said quietly, if you know how. He meant it differently now than he had in the cabin. Back then, it had been a promise he was making to himself in the dark. Now, it was simply a fact he had proven. He walked back toward the house, and above him, the Georgia sky was going that deep, late-afternoon blue that makes you feel, for a moment, that the world is entirely in order. Stay with us for one last scene, because what Zuri says to Corey on the porch of his new farm is the part of this story that will stay with you after everything else fades. Winter softened into a Georgia spring the way it always does, grudgingly at first, and then one morning, all at once. The new farm north of Oconee County came alive. The south field was planted and coming in clean. The equipment barn was organized and maintained. The fence lines were all straight. There was a new porch on the farmhouse, wider than the old one, built with good, solid boards. It did not creak the way the old porch had. Corey privately thought that a proper porch ought to creak at least a little. Character, not a flaw. The Forbes issue had come out in the early spring. The photographer had driven down on a warm February afternoon when the wheat was just beginning to show green across the far field. The cover photo was taken with Corey and Zuri standing easy in front of the new storage buildings, the open sky behind them. Corey had looked at the finished cover once, set the magazine on the windowsill, and gone back to work. He did not spend time thinking about what it meant. He already knew. It was a warm April evening when Zuri came out to the porch with 2 glasses of sweet tea. Corey was already in the wide chair at the far end, looking out across the fields. The sun was going down behind the tree line, laying long gold light across the new wheat, touching the tops of the fence posts so they seemed to glow from the inside. A pair of barn swallows were debating something energetically near the equipment shed. Down the road, a neighbor's dog was barking at something, almost certainly a squirrel, and absolutely not a threat to anyone. Zuri handed him his glass and sat down beside him. She said nothing for a while. That was one of the things about her. She was entirely comfortable in silence. Most people are not. Most people feel compelled to fill silence with something, anything, to prove that the air between two people is not empty. Zuri understood that some of the most honest things pass between people in exactly the spaces between words. After a while, she said, "Can I tell you something?" He looked over at her. "I followed your work," she said, "long before any of this happened." She turned the glass slowly in her hands. "I used to hear people in the agricultural community talk about the operation you ran outside Athens, the way you managed your rotation, the way your storage was organized, your equipment maintenance records." A pause. "Other farmers don't speak about each other that way, as you know. But they spoke about you, with real respect, the kind you can't build by talking." She looked out at the fields. "I admired the precision of it, the patience. I didn't reach out because you were a married man, and I respected that line completely. I just kept my distance and noticed." Corey was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I knew who you were before Serena called." Zuri turned to look at him. "Your name came up at the co-op about a year before everything fell apart. Someone mentioned a specialist who had helped untangle a complicated land dispute over in Oglethorpe County. Said she was thorough and she was fair." He looked at her. "Those are the 2 things I trust most in a person." Zuri smiled. Not a performed smile, not a polite one. Just a real one, small and genuine, the kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches anywhere else. He reached over and took her hand. "Here is what this story is, underneath everything. It is a story about a man who was told, in every practical and personal way, that he did not matter. That his patience was weakness. That his silence was ignorance. That what he had built was something easy to take. And it is a story about what happens when a man like that simply continues to be exactly who he is, with steady hands and a long memory, and a clear understanding that truth does not need help being loud. Corey did not set out to destroy Ariana. He did not need to. He built something honest and allowed the honesty to do what honesty eventually does. It stood. It stood after the noise died down, after the maneuvering ran out, after the only thing remaining was the actual record of who had done what, carefully documented over time. He gathered his evidence without anger. He expanded his land without announcement. He waited, the way a farmer waits, knowing that what you plant in the dark will eventually come up in the light. And the man who walked out of that courthouse with almost nothing rebuilt not just a farm, but a life, a real one, built from the same materials as the first: patience, honest work, precise hands. But this time, without the weight of someone else's fear pressing down on every single decision he made. He had started long before anyone realized it. The swallows settled. The last of the sun disappeared behind the tree line. The fields turned that soft, deep green that Georgia fields take on in the final light of an April evening. One of the most quietly beautiful things in the world, if you happen to be standing in the right place to see it. This story reminds us of something most people never say out loud. The people who loved us quietly, who showed up every single day without a speech, without applause, without asking to be noticed. Those are the ones we understand too late. And when they are gone, the silence they leave behind is a very specific shape. It fits exactly the space they used to fill. If you were sitting alone tonight in a house that used to hold more noise than it does now, maybe you know exactly what that silence sounds like. Here is what Corey's story teaches, in practical and ordinary terms. Do not wait until something is completely gone before you look at it clearly. This week, find one photograph of someone you took for granted, a husband, a son, a quiet friend, and set it on the kitchen table beside your morning coffee. Not to grieve, just to look. Just to sit with who they actually were, separate from whatever story you told yourself about them at the time. Then, on a plain piece of paper, not a journal, just paper, write down one thing they did for you that you never thanked them for. One specific thing. Not, he was always there. Something real. Something with a date, a place, a smell you still remember. You do not have to show it to anyone. You do not have to resolve anything. Just name the thing. That is enough. That is where the quiet work of honesty begins, at a kitchen table, with coffee going cold, in the ordinary light of an ordinary morning. If this story meant something to you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. These are authentic human stories, shaped by real pain and real dreams. AI helped with grammar, flow, and structure, but the heart, the moral weight, and the life-changing lessons belong entirely to the human creators and their audience. Production team: Story and Screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character Development and Visual Conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video Scripting and Scene Adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.